Okay, hello everyone. We're kind of doing a reformat of how this whole reflection video thing is going to go. So I have the video up here. We got all this business, and this is the final video, and then I also have the original project up here, but I will mention that there are some elements missing, and most of them are going to be towards the beginning, things like this, because once that video released, my computer died, and I had to get a new one, and thankfully I had most of the information backed up, so it wasn't a big deal. Back up your data, it's very important, like seriously, this is a huge recommendation to do that. But basically I think it's better, instead of doing the whole smartphone crappy thing, which is never really good for any video, to be honest, but it's convenient. With these kind of reflection things, I think it's better for me to just have this on in the background like this and be able to jump back and so forth. So this one, the Danganronpa video, was over an hour long. Really, if you want to be specific, the video is actually closer to like 52, 53 minutes, but I wanted to hit that hour mark for the same reason I said at the end of the video, mostly just so I don't set this ridiculous goal for myself again and make these super long scripts. I think this video is as tight and condensed as it could be for all the subject matter I'm covering, but at the same time, I don't really want to take on these super bloated projects. I think one of the big problems, I want to say, and I hesitate to say problem, but I think one of the issues a lot of people run into when they're writing something, and I'll pull up the script actually right now too, now that we're at it. I think one of the big issues that people run into with their scripts when they're writing something, whether it be, even with writing in general, like outside of writing for a video, is that they think that longer is better. They think that, like, I don't know what I did there. There we go. They think that the more stuff you put in here, the better it is. And that just isn't the case. If your video's like freaking 7 hours long, then in most cases, not always, but in most cases, it doesn't mean that you have more content than other people. Usually it just means that you're taking the same kind of content and you're just bloating it out for no real reason. You're usually redundantly saying the same things over and over and over again. So one of my goals with future videos, and why I say that there's going to be quicker turnarounds on some of these things, is I don't want to make scripts that are 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 words long, because most of the time there's no reason for the script to be that long in the first place. And in this case, I would say that I think I did a good job at cutting things down wherever possible, but I will say that there was a point when I'm hitting those high numbers where I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to make a super long video. But I don't think that's really a good goal to set for yourself. I think the better objective is to say, I'm going to make a good video. I'm going to make a tight video that talks about everything I want to talk about in as short amount of time as possible. Just condense your argument, because then it makes it more, it makes it easier to revisit, whether it be a piece of writing or a video or whatever it is. I think it makes it more revisitable when your thing is shorter, because then people won't feel like they have to make this huge commitment for it. And I know that that's the case with me in some videos that I really enjoy that are verging on really high, times. I'm thinking about this video and this video and my suggestions right there. Point is, I don't really plan to make another super long, hour-long scripted video. There might be some other projects that go longer than this, but they won't be highly scripted, heavily produced in this way. They'd probably be more along the lines of, like, the Captain Toad commentary, for example, or something like that. Anyway, the big issue with this project really comes down to a few things. Mostly me being a perfectionist when it comes down to it. So I wrote this script, and you already saw the script, and it was that long. So then you have to do all the voiceover for everything, and just like my face right here, it was quite the ordeal. And that ended up being, I want to see how many files that was, if I can find it. No, I still have it. So it's 4 files. So right here we got an hour 45, 53. That one was really short. And then an hour 31. So we're getting on the 5-hour mark, 4-hour mark, I want to say. 4.5, it looks like. So for a 1-hour video, it's ending up being like 4.5 hours of audio content. And the reason why is because when you say something, when you read through it once, usually it's not going to end up being the best take. Usually the better approach is to not only, come into it having read through the script aloud multiple times already, which is something I've started doing ever since I started having Scott look over some of my scripts with me, because he and I, what we always do is read them aloud to each other, because on his end, he's always said that makes it easier for him to point out various things and pay attention to things. But I've also learned that as someone reading that script, I think that also helps me as a writer and a voiceover person and all sorts of stuff as well. Because when you're saying something aloud, if you can't read it well, then that means you didn't write it well. So that means you probably need to rewrite that section and figure something out. Sorry about that ding. So I ended up doing that a lot, but just through reading it through multiple times, it makes it easier. So that way every take that you make is a good take, but then it's about which take is the best take. And then when you go in and do it on your voiceover, then note that your first take is probably never your best take. So I'm not saying cut it out immediately, but I am saying that go into that first take knowing that it's probably not going to be your best take. And then I go usually a paragraph at a time. I think going by sentence is a little bit tedious, and I think I would get frustrated, but it's really about what's most comfortable for, whoever's doing it. I know tons of people that do it different ways. Then, in terms of me being perfectionist, if you zoom in here on this project, you'll see that there's a lot of little gray bars or cuts here. So there's the gray bar. Ooh, this ended up zooming in way more than I thought it would. I think my computer's getting a little laggy because I have just so many processor-intensive programs open all at once. So this is basically a little gap. So this is actual silence. If I go like that, or is it gonna? It's 2 frames of silence. And you can tell from, well, you can't because of the all-star apologies in the background. But it's silence. So I go here. Yeah. It's a 2-frame pause, and the reason why that pause is there is because in this gap I originally breathed. You might notice this in this, because I'm not going to cut out all of the breaths I do in here, but often when I'm talking into a microphone, I tend to breathe very heavily, especially when I'm doing voiceover work. So those usually become super apparent, and if you watch some of my older videos, it's almost unbearable, and I couldn't stand it. So with the Queens of the Stone Age video and the Monopoly video, I started cutting them out. I think I might have even done it in the End is Nigh video too. But here I just went super all in, and you can see that basically every single phrase I'm cutting afterwards to cut out some sort of breath or something, just because it's very apparent and it's distracting in my opinion. So I always went through and I'm going through and cutting all that out. That took multiple hours of doing that as well. So then my next thing is when I'm laying visuals out, the problem is this video is about a visual novel. And a lot of times when you're thinking about visuals in a video, a lot of times you want the visuals to represent what you're talking about, right? So like you want to match the visuals with your voiceover. If you just play something in the background and just talk over it and the things that you're saying aren't relevant to what's on screen, then there's really no point for you to even have any visuals in the first place. So a lot of times with, documentaries or things like that, a lot of times what that means, you're going out and getting a lot of footage, because if you have a piece of voiceover and there's not a relevant shot that you have, then that means you didn't do your job well, when you went out and got footage in the first place. A lot of times when I was helping, back in college, I helped out with a lot of news packages and mini documentaries. A lot of times what would happen is we'd be sitting in the editing room, and a lot of times there'd be a piece of voiceover and there's just no footage for it. And when there's no footage for it, then you have to go get it. So part of my problem was there were a lot of times where I was talking about concepts that just there's no matching footage in the Danganronpa trilogy. And so I didn't want to just throw in anything. I find that kind of lazy. So what I ended up doing is I decided that I'm going to go and get footage of my dog over here, all the way back here, and I'm going to use him to talk about an action movie, because I use the action movie example. And I feel that having this in the background is better than having, I'm going to do this in the actual video over here and do it this way. Because if you do this, then this is actually better explaining what you're talking about than just than just showing random video game footage in the background that isn't relevant. And then the other thing too is that when I was talking about an action movie, then the other option is just show footage of the action movie, right? But the problem you run into there is that I didn't really introduce any action movie, and there's a chance that someone watching it may not have seen that movie either. So any footage I show of a particular action movie might not be useful to everyone watching the video. So that's why I decided to get something more authentic, just some random dog footage. Yeah, it's not filmed great, but it's something, and I'm happy with how that turned out. The other thing too is that this video is freaking gigantic, right? It's an hour long, and with heavily scripted, like, there's not really much of an entertainment factor outside of the core content of the video, and I feel like one thing actually my dad always had stressed with, giving speeches or lectures or anything like that is that you should break up what you're talking about with, some sort of tangent to basically help maintain the listener's attention. If you keep just rambling on and on and on, especially with no accompanying visuals, but like regardless, it's hard to maintain people's attention when it's just monotone, blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about this, blah, 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 So you got to do something stupid or funny or just otherwise tangential just to maintain people's, interest. So a lot of times in video, what they do is they don't have the voiceover the entire time. What they do is sometimes they show what's called nat sound, which is basically the sound from an actual setting that's being filmed. So they say instead of just constant talking, they give you a few seconds to listen to some birds chirping, and then you go back into the content of the piece. So it helps with, viewer immersion, and it helps space out from this constant talking. So I was trying to find a way to break that up in this video, because in some of my other videos, yeah, you can do it, but it's not as important when it's only a 10 or 15 minute video. When you hit 20-30 minutes, yeah, it's important, but thankfully for like the Queens of the Stone Age or the Metallica videos, I had the music itself to kind of break things up a little bit, which helped. With Monopoly, that was kind of challenging, but I think I did a good job at visually engaging people outside of that. And the video was short enough that I didn't think that chopping things up, breaking up content necessarily mattered as much. But here, this video is an hour long, so I thought it was very important to do that. So what I decided to do was basically put myself inside the game, as it will. So what I did is I took a bunch of pictures of myself, and then I rebuilt the entire Danganronpa 2 UI by myself in motion. And so if you go over here, this is kind of broken because, like I said, I don't have all the original assets for this, and there's some missing files in here, specifically that. So it's kind of confused as to what's going on. But I rewrote all the class trial things and drew all the letters out individually so that way it matched. And then I did the motion so that way it tracked along, and then matched the speed of the original class trial text in Danganronpa 2. Danganronpa 2's UI was the easiest one to remake. With Danganronpa 3, it had text behind people, and it'd be harder to make that flow from the game, in the beginning of the video to myself. I found that with the UI being largely superimposed over things, it was very easy. It was also a linear movement, where Danganronpa 1's was very... it had a curve to it, and it had a very like a stretch and squash kind of movement as it went around the curve, if that makes sense. So the letters themselves somewhat augmented as well as they were going around the curve. It wasn't just letters moving in a path. So it was just very hard to replicate in a very simple animation software such as this. So I went with Danganronpa 2 for that reason. And then, of course, I went and I took pictures of myself. I'm going to not save this. I'll probably delete that eventually. And then I went over here, and I took a bunch of pictures myself, and then I cropped out all the background. I didn't do this with a green screen. I don't own a green screen, but I wish I did. That would make things a lot easier to just chroma that out, unless you're Dennis and you film it in front of a freaking non-existent blue screen. You're like, oh, blue screen, yeah, sure, okay, whatever you say. And so that was the idea, that I would basically cut back to myself talking, so that way the talking itself would kind of be the break. But then I kind of was thinking, no, because you still have me talking all the time, and it's still not that big of a break, and I thought it was kind of So I had this idea, and I think I came up with this idea about a month before the video actually came out. And basically I reached out to a bunch of my friends on Discord, and I was like, hey, if you want to be in my next video, just send me an audio file. Just send me an audio file, excuse me. Just send me an audio file just saying that you agree with what I just said. Just, I agree with that. That was really smart. Hooray. And then take a picture of yourself. And then what I would do is I'd put all these people in the game with me, which is what I ended up doing. If you go over to the video, and we'll go to somewhere around here. Let's see. We got perjury going on. It's hard to do this when, like, it's such a long video. Okay, this is too late, so it's earlier. Okay, what point, if I find it, then I find it. I think it's a bit earlier. Let's see. Surface our world. Meta commentary. This is stupid. I'm not going to spend this much time looking at it. I'll just play it, and hopefully it'll pop up. So I decided to put them in the thing as well, and then it kind of adds this nice comedic break, because most of the submissions I got were really stupid. And then, of course, I had some fun with the people that couldn't send me pictures of themselves. They couldn't send me pictures of themselves because they were like, I don't want to send a picture of myself. I've never revealed my face, and I don't want to reveal my face on the internet, which is totally respectable. So with Snakerer, for example, I did, where is it? Oh, did I not make it? The backup might have been before I made it, so we might not have that actual file. It's fine. I basically made I took Karen from SpongeBob, and I took the TV, and I put his freaking stupid channel banner, like ridiculous channel banner, in there, and did that. So that was pretty fun. So I had fun. I had fun doing all that. So the point is that at least 5-6 times in the video, there's a hard break from the content just for something stupid, and then you can go back into it. So that way, it's maintaining viewer interest. I'm tired for no real reason. Maintaining viewer interest and keep them going as this super long thing plays out. So that was the next idea, and that worked out really well. So those things, when all combined, basically made it so I could, visually engage people throughout the entire thing, despite its length. The idea is that, if you're starting to get bored, then at least there's something spicy to like reinvigorate your interest, and then you keep watching. And that's the idea anyway. Another thing, I've been getting more and more into more transition heavy edits with every single video I make. So, I think I want to say, with the Queens of the Stone Age video, like starting in 2018, really, I really focused on every single thing. Anytime you choose to cut between a clip, should it be a cut, or should it be a wipe, or should it be a slide, or should it be a fade out, fade in, or should it be a crossfade or something? I really kind of focused on that throughout the entire process. So if I zoom in a lot here, then what you'll see is a lot of the visuals, like sometimes there's hard cuts, like right here, for example. Yeah, this is a hard cut. But then a lot of times you're going to see transitions. In this case, this was a crossfade because it made sense, because the character portraits are right there, and so it made sense for them to go into each other pretty seamlessly like that. Other times we got, I think this is a... that's another crossfade actually. This is a circle out because it's kind of like almost like a television-y transition. I tried static and it just didn't look right. This one is going to be a blur, Gaussian transition. So all of them are basically based on what makes sense in that moment. One of my favorite transitions I used a lot, if I can find it, was the flow transition. Is this a flow transition? That's a cross dissolve. That's a flow transition. So what happens is that it takes the colored elements, basically, it takes colored elements that are similar between the two frames and then slides each colored element into each other. So for example, Byakuya's hair is kind of yellowy, and it knew that in the next thing that there's yellow squares there. So it could transition the yellow into that and then fade it, like, kind of sort of in that way. And then it saw that Makoto's face is the same color as his neck, and it in terms of hair color, the hair color better matches Byakuya's skin tone than Byakuya's hair. So they transitioned it from his neck up there. It's like, it's all this crazy automated process that I just freaking love. I just love going frame by frame through this and how it beautifully just transitions from one thing to the next. I think that's awesome. That's like one of the coolest things in Final Cut, that transition. But if you use it too much, then people are going to get sick of it. Because if you use too many, like, crazy movements, then people are just going to get lost. You want their eyes to follow your thoughts, right? So that's why you got to make sure that the transition that you're using whenever you choose to use a transition is the transition that makes the most sense for that thing. You don't want to just crossfade everything. You don't want to just hard cut everything. You don't want to just wipe everything. You want to make sure that every transition you use, every time you move from one shot to the next, it's the most appropriate thing for that moment. And that's what I really, really tried to emphasize a lot in this video. So I think that's why it turned out to be so visually tight, is because I focused so hard on every single transition like that. Because it's about, like, there's those levels. It's that level of, like, you start with, okay, well, I just have audio, and that's really great. Then you're like, I want to introduce visuals to this. And then the next level, like I said, would just be to play the footage in the background and not cut anything and just talk over it, right? And that, then above that, you're going to show relevant footage. You're going to find relevant footage for some things. But then when you get to a point where you have relevant footage for everything, then the next step above that is to figure out how transitioning between those things relates to what you're talking about. So it's no longer just what the footage, how the footage relates to what you're talking about. It's also how that footage is introduced in the first place. And I think traditionally when you were editing with things like Avid or Final Cut 7 or even editors before that, I think that those kind of questions were less important because non-linear editors just weren't that capable back then. But now in this modern era of digital video and social media focus and constant visual engagement, I think being able to find ways to constantly visually engage people throughout the entire thing is super important. So that's another thing I stressed in this here video. Some other challenges. One thing I learned was an actual bug in Final Cut, believe it or not. When I go down here all the way towards the end, and then I'm going to stop this video because I'm talking too much. Towards the end, when I was doing the different levels of meta-narrative, I ran into some bugs because there's this feature called compound clips. You can see it right here. This is a compound clip, and you can see it by this icon. And basically what a compound clip is, it's Final Cut's version of a subclip, where basically what you do is you just take a bunch of stuff that you have in the timeline, and then you turn it into its own, like, one single piece of media that you can reuse constantly. It's basically mostly for convenience more than anything else. But the key benefit of subclipping or compound clipping things is that you can add keyframes and movements to the whole thing all at once and not have to move everything individually, because a lot of times when you move things individually, it's hard to actually time it out so it's moving the whole group all at once. So it's better to just move the whole group all at once. But when there's a transparency layer on a particular subclip, a lot of times it doesn't handle it well, and so I ran into a lot of issues with that, and I thought I literally had to, like, scrap the whole project, but the answer ended up being taking the subclip, exporting that out separately as an MOV file. If you don't know, MOV files preserve transparency, so export that as an MOV file with transparency, and then put that back into the video. So when I go back over here, I think I did this with the meta commentary part, but I did this with some other parts as well. If I go ahead to the spot, this is too late. We need to go earlier. Danganronpa. So this whole clip here is a full video clip that I exported separately as an MOV file, and that's what happened. So this isn't a sub clip. This is an exported video file that I'm playing over top of the other video file, and that's how that works. So if you're interested in sub clipping a Final Cut, there is a bug, but you know, hey, it is what it is. So that's all I got. I'm not gonna play any copyrighted music because that's probably not a good idea. But I'm gonna close this off here. Hopefully this was interesting. Like I said in the Monopoly one, I might go back and do this with some of the older projects, and I'll do it like this because I think this is more interesting. But I obviously won't have those Final Cut projects, or in the case of, I guess, nothing, because I already did the Monopoly video. I didn't really have any motion elements in older videos. So I would just be talking over the original footage, I guess. So I could just pull up the YouTube video, full screen it, hit play, and then just start talking, I guess. And that's how I would do that. So instead of constant visual engagement and showing the relevant things I'm talking about, I would just play the video, I guess. Sort of funny how I like bring that back. That's all I got. So I might come back and do that, but I might not. So hopefully this was an interesting 26 minutes of your time. It's basically half the length of the original video, which is kind of stupid, but the Monopoly reflection was 20 minutes, and that video was 20 minutes, so I guess I'm improving.